Alright, so today I'm going to look at the Dakota, and I think that I've got a battery going bad on me. So first thing I'm going to do here is see how it starts up. It's been starting real slow all week, and I'm not even sure it's going to start now. Okay, see? You can hear that it started, but it cranked slow.
Yeah.
So, and that's been happening all week. And then even after driving, 20 miles or so, and then shutting it off, and then waiting a few minutes and starting it, it's cranking slow like that. So I think the battery is on its way out. Okay, so I've left the truck sitting here for about 20 hours now, and the battery is still reading 12.37. Which, I don't know, it kind of indicates to me that maybe the battery is okay in this after all, and that maybe I've got a problem with my starter or the interconnect to the starter. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do real quick here, just to kind of rule out the alternator again, is to start the truck up if it'll start, and then do a load test. Turn on everything and see what kind of voltage we're getting from the alternator out. Alright, so you can see the voltage even keeps creeping up more and more right here. So I'm going to start the truck, and I'm going to leave the video on and see what happens as it starts. And then we'll start doing a load test and see what we get for alternator output. Okay, so there with the truck running, we're getting 14.3. I'm not going to know what it dropped to as it started until I stop this video and play it back. But now we'll do a load test and see what kind of output. Okay, so that's with everything on, the engine running, headlights on, dome lights on, the heater fan on. I don't have air conditioning or any of that in this truck, so that's probably pretty much all that's going to be on. And you can see the alternator seems to be keeping up just fine with it. So it looks like I'm going to have to dig into the starter here and see if it's the starter or maybe the interconnects here between the battery and the starter. Okay, so I finally crawled under the truck here to have a look at the starter, and I don't know how visible it is. I can't get quite the right angle here with the light and the camera and without the truck being jacked up. But you can see that the housing on this thing is pretty well corroded. And again, I don't know how well the camera's showing it from this angle, but there's actually a hole in it, or several holes in the metal there on the end of it. So I think it's time to replace this thing and get a new one in there. Well, actually, I'm going to, I'll probably get a remanufactured one from my local Napa. So that'll be the next step. Okay, so before I get started with this, I'll just kind of put a little disclaimer out here and say that, if this is the kind of work that you're not used to doing, then you may want to have somebody that knows what they're doing either help you or do it for you. Now, the first thing that I've done is I've jacked up the truck. And I always put the truck on the jack stand when I'm working under it like this. I don't like to use ramps or anything like that. I've got these heavy-duty jack stands, and I've got this first one resting on the frame, and I've got this second one here just in case something happens with the first one and it fails. The truck will fall on the second one, which is maybe a ½ inch or so lower, and should hopefully prevent any problems if something were to fall. But when you're one other bit of safety advice is that you should remove at least one of the battery cables to disconnect the battery, so that there's no chance that you can energize something while you're working under here and either cause a short or say cause the starter to activate for some reason while you've got your hands on it. Alright, so I'm under the truck here. I'm laying under the front of the truck now. I'm kind of looking at the starter. You can see the hole in it there, kind of on the left of the frame. But what I'm showing here is what I've done is I've tried to soak the bolts that hold this thing on with PB blaster. I'm going to let them sit for a little while. There's one nut on the bottom of the starter that I assume is attached to a stud that's sticking out of the engine housing there, and then on the top of the starter, which you can't quite see, and I don't think I can get the camera in there, there's another bolt that goes into a threaded hole in the housing. So those two things will have to come off in order to get the starter out. And then on the far side of the starter, again not visible from this angle, are the starter wires that come down from the battery. And those I can't reach either from the top or from underneath. So I'm hoping that once I'm able to remove the starter here, I can kind of turn it and get it out of the way and then access those wires. I'm sure they're bolted onto the starter. Okay, so I managed to get the top bolt of the starter out, which was the more difficult of the two, by going in above the wheel here. And you can see I used an impact gun to do it with an extension, and I was able to get in there kind of behind the steering coupler and get right on the bolt, and there was just enough room for the impact gun to get on there and break the top bolt loose. The bottom bolt was a simple matter of just using a 5/8 wrench or a ratchet wrench, and that came off just fine. Okay, you can see I got the starter pulled out and twisted around, and there's the nut that holds on the wire, the starter wire and the sense wire. Okay, so here's the old starter. I was able to fish it out and kind of get a close-up look at it, and it's getting a little corroded here. You can kind of see the case is deteriorated, and I'm guessing that everything is just starting to get a little funky inside, which is why it's been kind of cranking slow. So it was probably better to replace it sooner than later. Now here's the electrical connection, and on my truck there was one lug over this, which I was able to remove the nut, and then just this one sense wire connector here, and that just kind of came out. You needed to use a little screwdriver to kind of help it. It had a locking clip. And of course here's the bottom bolt, and again I'm not sure why the whole stud came out, but it did. I don't think that's broken or anything. I think that just came out. And then there's the top bolt. So now I've got the new starter. I'll prep that and get ready to put it in. Okay, so here we go. I've got the new starter next to the old one. Actually, this is a remanufactured unit from Napa. And well, it looks pretty much the same. I don't see any major differences here just yet. So I assume it's going to work. Usually have pretty decent luck with Napa. So I guess now we'll just do everything in reverse. Okay, so there's the starter, kind of ready, the new starter, ready to go in. I've got the sense wire clipped back on, and I've got the starter wire bolted back on there, and ready to insert everything back into the Alright, so I've got the starter bolted back in, and what I found was that I put the bottom bolt stud in first and got it snug. Then I was able to get the top one in and pivot everything around. And of course I just cranked this on with my 5/8 ratchet wrench, and the top one I tightened that back down just using a socket and an extension to clear the starter. And I was able to kind of reach up there and crank it down. Took a little while, but I was able to get it. Okay, so I realized after I got everything together here that this little rubber plug fell out of the starter. I think this is some sort of like breather for it. So I'm just going to crawl under here and reinsert. Okay, you can see there that I've got the rubber plug inserted into the starter housing. There's just a hole there, and the plug just kind of works its way in that hole and stays there, and hopefully it'll stay there over time. Okay, here's a moment of truth. Let's see what happens. Okay, looks like everything was a success.